So they give us like a few equations and they want us to find the domain and range. They're not the exact toolkit functions, but they're based on that. So if you look at example 8 here, this is a cubic function that we have. So it's going to look something like the cubic function. We don't have any restrictions on the domain. We're not going to be dividing by 0 for whatever value x is, and we're not going to be taking the square root of a negative number. So the domain is going to be all real numbers. And the range is also going to be all real numbers. Now, if you wanted to know what the graph looked like, you could make a table of values and get some points and see what it looked like. Here we have another one. This is going to be, it's going to look something like the reciprocal function. We notice there's a restriction that x cannot be -1. So that's going to affect the domain. The domain then is going to be all real numbers from -infinity to -1, but not including the -1, union, and then -infinity to -1. Ah, I wrote that wrong. Dang it. And then all real numbers from -1 to infinity. There we go. There's our domain. What about the range? And again, you can make a table of values and graph this, but you'll notice that this function will never equal 0. So you can't set it equal to 0. There's no x value that's going to give you a 0 output. So the range won't have a 0 in it. So it's going to go from -infinity to 0, but don't include the 0, union 0 to infinity. And then that would be the domain and the range. The last one's a little bit trickier maybe. So it's a square root function. We know that the stuff under the radical, the argument, the x plus 4 has to be greater than or equal to 0. Now when you solve that inequality, you get x is greater than or equal to -4. That is going to be the domain then. So the domain is going to go, it's going to include -4 to infinity. Now if I make a quick little graph here, let's say I plug in -4. I would get 0 for an output. So let's make a little table of values here. If I plug in -4, I'm going to get 0. 0 times 2 is 0. If I plugged in -3, that would give me the square root of 1, which is 1, times 2, which is 2. So I could kind of get a picture of what's going on here. And let's say I plugged in 0. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. That gives me 3 points. You don't always have to graph these necessarily, but I thought it might be helpful to see it. So there's the point -4, 0. Then I have -3, 2, which is up here. And then 0, 4, which is like up here. So it's going to make that shape, that square root shape. Mine doesn't look very good, but it's going to make that shape. It's a little bit stretched because of the 2 here. And you can see then what the range is going to be. So the domain we kind of knew because of the restriction, -4 to infinity. The range, though, in this case, is going to be from 0 to infinity. Now you may have guessed that, but things can make the graph change, and so you might want to do a little graph to see exactly what the range is. Okay.